Ephesians has been all about being transformed by grace. That's the title of this series. We started in chapter 1, and we learned that it was God's plan from the beginning of time to show grace to sinful humanity. We learned that we received grace by faith, that grace extends to the Gentiles. And then there's this transition somewhere around Ephesians 4, where Paul suddenly becomes immensely practical. He uses expressions like walking in the way of the light or walking in the way of love. And he starts to name specific practical things that someone transformed by grace will do. It's all about a grace transformation. Ephesians 6 is kind of like Paul's final thoughts on living a transformed life. He talks about household relationships. He talks about spiritual warfare, and then he talks about prayer. In some ways, three unrelated thoughts. But if there's a way to sum it all up, it's just this idea that we have been utterly transformed by grace. It affects every single area of life. One of the most indicting chapters in the entire Bible is found in Isaiah 59. I'm just going to read a selection of verses but here. All is darkness. For brightness, but we walk in deep shadows. Our offenses are many in your sight. Our sins testify against us. Truth is nowhere to be found. So, just some really indicting verses about the sinfulness of humanity in Isaiah 59. And so God looks at humanity. He is angry that there is no justice, and he decides to pour his wrath out on his enemies. And so at the end of Isaiah 59, God goes and he gets his armor, and he puts his armor on in order to fight his enemies. This is Isaiah 59:17. He puts on righteousness as his breastplate and the helmet of salvation on his head. So Isaiah is just using imagery, but the imagery Isaiah uses is that God has armor and he puts it on to fight his enemies. And who are his enemies? Sinful humanity. Me and you. We are the enemies God is dressing to fight. So you have to understand how utterly transformed by grace we are, that not only are we saved from the wrath of God by grace through faith, but here in Ephesians 6, we are told to put on the armor of God. We are told to put on the armor that belongs to God, that he would wear. The armor that he's meant to be wearing when he comes to fight and destroy us. We are told to put that on in order to withstand the attacks of the devil. In Ephesians 1:21, he told us that Christ was seated above every ruler, authority, power, and dominion. In other words, Christ is superior to any spiritual power. In Ephesians 3:10, he told us that it is the job of the church to proclaim God's wisdom to the rulers and the authorities in the heavenly realm. And now in 6:12, he says, our struggle is against rulers, authorities, and powers of both this dark world and spiritual forces in the heavenly realm. 3 times in Ephesians, Paul has used this phrase, rulers, powers, and authorities, to describe some kind of cosmic struggle or spiritual warfare. But spiritual warfare is not something we are told to cower from. It's not something we're told to flee from. No, we were told that it's something that Christ is over, that he has power over, that it's the job of the church to fight. And then here we are given these instructions to put on the armor of God. 6:11 says, put on the full armor of God so you can withstand the devil's schemes. You have everything you need to withstand dark spiritual forces. Everything you need has been given to you by a gracious God who equips us with more than we could ever deserve.